Let's see here. We'll get the old YouTube fired up here for just a little bit. Allow them to come in here for a little bit here. There we go. Should see YouTube coming up here for those that who wish to jump over to the YouTube side here. Starting to get kind of reacclimated. I think we'll just probably kind of stick to the or kind of initial rundown through stuff here in the morning and then shut her back off till we can kind of get our feet wet here a little bit more. But do appreciate you guys tuning in wherever you're tuning in from here this morning. Again, if you're hanging out over on the Beam side here this morning, good to see you. If you're hanging out over on the Pilled side, good to see you. Hanging out over on Rumble, good to see you. Kick, Be Live, and now YouTube. If you're hanging out over there here this morning, certainly appreciate you guys tuning in. Of course, the notifications net over out on the Twitter, over on True Social, over on Gab, all the usual places net that we put the noties net out on. That being said, some of the stuff that we're going to get into here this morning, if I can get things squared away here behind the scenes, there we go. Again, some of the stuff that for those just joining, and then on YouTube side here this morning, we certainly got off to an early start here this morning and covered some stuff in that from over the weekend here. But what you might have missed, Germany's steel industry collapse, the march toward green socialism we started off with, and measure assets in gold, not dollars. Also, average new car price in U.S. tops 50 grand for the first time ever. Stuff is breaking and it's going to get worse. We got into that. Also, DEI going jobless. NBC joins media trend and cuts diversity journalists, allegedly, at least as far as we know. If we measured the economy by quality of life instead of GDP, we'd be in a depression. Got just done covering that. And also, auto loan delinquencies surged 50% as cracks deepen across U.S. credit markets. Missed any of that? You can rewind the tape here over on the various other platforms out there. Some other stuff we're going to get into here on the morning. It says bizarre bankruptcy at the heart of this week's regional bank meltdown. We'll get into more of the story behind the scenes of what is playing out there. Also, Department of Energy unveils national roadmap to deliver commercial fusion power by mid-2030s. We'll get into the lay of the land, as it were, per the Department of Energy. Also, how Americans' paper money system and the Federal Reserve plunder American taxpayers. No surprise, right? How does that happen? Well, most of us pretty well know, but those sneaking into the back pews and that, we'll get a little bit of a lay of the land, I guess. We'll get into that here. Also, more Americans experienced homelessness during Biden's term. No surprise. 12 years of data prove China's Belt and Road Initiative is a debt trap. Yeah, no kidding. I think we kind of knew that going into it. We've covered stories in the past, been a while, but how people get ensnared, all these various countries and that, build out all their infrastructure, ports, rail, you name it, bring their own workers in and then sack them with all the debt. And of course, them being poor, they can't repay. So yeah, they just snag their ports and the stuff that they just put in. Washington Nuclear Facility will deploy 12 Amazon-funded SMRs, small modular reactors. We'll get into that here on the nuclear side here in just a bit. And forget the great wealth transfer. This is much worse. Debasement isn't a new idea. Yeah, talking about the collapse of the dollar, as it were, or the slow and steady depreciation of the dollar, if you want to look at it from that standpoint, or the rise of gold and silver from the other side of the coin. And then we'll jump and kind of switch gears a little bit here. Digital ID black pill moment. We'll get into that here. Peace out over the weekend, as well as slow drift to new norms. We'll get into that here. Kind of a follow-on piece to a couple pieces we covered here last week out of Off Guardian. We'll get into that here in just a bit as well. That being said, let's take a look at the weather here, see what's doing across the country here this morning, and out to the left coast now we go here this morning, looking pretty free and clear, at least per way of radar here at this hour. Not much doing, a little bit of scatter net coming across Montana, into the Dakotas and Minnesota, coming across the top end of the country into Canada here this morning. Got a little bit of stuff. We'll take a look to see what we get on the precipcast here momentarily. South Dakota, Minnesota, all the way back down to Nebraska. Got kind of a line of storms running through there, perhaps, or at least precip. We'll take a look, see what that's doing. Everybody else across the south, southeast, net looking pretty good, all the way down to Florida. Maybe a little flare up or so. Some juiced up skies down in the southern part of Florida here this morning. Otherwise, remnants of the system net cruising through yesterday. This thing was stretched all the way from Canada, clear up here in Hudson Bay, all the way down to the coast and Gulf of America yesterday. Looked like a major mess, and there's remnants of that here, still sweeping through New York and up in New England here this morning. And by way of any sort of spinners on the water, we're kind of getting late in the season here, but no major spinners on the water over on the Pacific side here. I think what we have, 99E or 91E kind of in this general vicinity here last week and never really materialized, so I suspect that one is now gone. And over on the Atlantic side, doesn't look like we've got anything major going on there either. No major spinners on the water. Maybe keep an eye on this guy here. Not sure what the National Weather Service and Hurricane Center and all those guys are predicting here, but at least for the moment, nothing on the waters on the Atlantic side either. And by way of precip here on this Monday, looks like, again, for folks net out in Washington State, down in Oregon, maybe a little fog in it on your drive along the coastal areas net here this morning. Folks net over into Idaho, western parts into Montana, down to Wyoming, and that looks like maybe getting the SNOW variety of precip here this morning. Yep, it's getting that time of year, folks. What's it been? A little over a week or so now that we started reporting the frozen precip here. Yeah, getting real close, folks, and all the way down into South Dakota, all the way down to Nebraska, it looks like, or into Wyoming, I should say. Getting maybe a little bit of snow up in the northeastern portion of the state there. Folks, net coming across Dakotas into Minnesota. It looks like that is a rain event coming across the Canadian border here this morning. Down to the south, again, pretty free and clear. It looks like folks net down in the southeast got high pressure domes situated over the Alabama, Georgia area there this morning. Folks net down in southern part of Florida, maybe picking up a little passing thunderstorm and that through there, and a folks net up into Pennsylvania, up into New York, coming across into Vermont, New Hampshire, up into Maine, Massachusetts, Connecticut, all through that corridor. Again, seeing the remnants of the storms net that we saw here a day or so ago here in these parts. And it looks like 4 or 5/10 of an inch nets in some locations, laying down some pretty decent amounts of rain, and folks net back to the west side of New York, also picking up a couple 2-3/10, some thunderstorms net in the mix there as well. And temperature-wise, here this morning, folks net down in Florida coming in right around the, looks like right around the 80-degree mark net here this morning. Folks net top end of the state coming in mid-60s. About a 15-degree swing top to bottom there as that front works its way across. Folks net on up the eastern seaboard, Carolinas, Virginia in the 60s. 50s net start to tail off by the time you get up to Maryland, Delaware area here this morning. Folks net up to Pennsylvania, still holding in the mid-50s. Massachusetts, Connecticut way in the 50s and 60s both. Looks like New York in the 60s. Vermont, New Hampshire, up into Maine, also in the 50s net here this morning, and right around the upper 40s net by the time you get up to the northern parts of Maine, up around the Canadian border here this morning. 60s net back toward New York, looks like 60s and 50s both, and Pennsylvania in the 40s net more toward the west. Looks like 50s net more toward the east, or West Virginia, I should say. In the 40s net coming across there. Folks net back down around the coastal areas of the Gulf of America here this morning. Coming in right around the 60-degree, mid-60s or so around Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and through that corridor there, down to Houston area, down in the, or should say up in the mid-upper 70s net there, 80s net by the time you get down toward the southern tip of Texas. And by the time you get to the northern part of the state there, it looks like you're in the mid-60s. So again, about a 15 or so degree swing top to bottom of the state there. Pushing up through the plains, looks like some 50s and 40s net by the time you work your way up into the Dakotas net here this morning. Northern parts of North Dakota holding in the 40s. Looks like 40s net coming across top end of Minnesota. 50s net more toward the south. Folks net over to Wisconsin. 40s in the northern part of the state, as well as some lower 50s net in the southern portions. Folks net coming across Montana and across the west. Looks like some 40s, some 30s, and 20s back toward the west side of Montana, back toward Idaho here this morning. Folks net down in northwestern parts of Wyoming in the 30s net here this morning. Got some 30s net coming across the east side of the state. Washington State in the 30s net here this morning. Some 40s and back along the coast. 40s net over into Oregon. Looks like some 30s net in the mix across much of the state there. And coming across the top end of California here this morning. Got some 20s and 30s net. 40s more along the coast. Folks net coming down through the middle portion of the state in the 50s. And by the time you get down toward the southern portions of Cali here this morning, you're going to be in the low 60s net here to start your morning. Folks net down in the southwest portions of Arizona, also in the 60s net here on the morning. And it looks like cloud cover. It looks high pressure across the Pacific Northwest. Still got some clouds net coming in, so high broken clouds and periods of sun and clouds mixed in here on the day. Coming across much of the west. Coming across in the plains in the Midwest. Looks like some clouds net coming across there. Stretching all the way down into, looks like Kansas, Nebraska, down in Oklahoma, all the way back to Colorado, kind of wrapping around there. Folks net down in the southwest net should see some fairly sunny skies. As well, the folks down in Texas net here and across much of the southeast. Got that big high-pressure dome net situated over there. A couple clouds net coming across Florida here this morning, but the folks net up in New England and on up the eastern seaboard there. It looks like going to be under some cloud cover net here on the day. And let's see, that's a quick take a look at the weather here this morning. But we have any sort of power outages net here this morning. Do a quick refresh here. It's left over from yesterday, I believe. And it looks like we still got about 55,000 folks across the country in that here this morning with some power outages. Pennsylvania, the latest here to trip with about 12,000 or so without power. Virginia, Texas, Ohio got 4 or 5,000 or so apiece. But over to Pennsylvania, by way of some of those storms that just went through, looks like maybe Mifflin County, rather, I guess, is one of the ones that got about 5,000 or so north of without power, as well as Venango County and some select counties that got hundreds, one to 200 or so, maybe a little less than that across much of the state there, assuming that is where those storms that have just gone through. And boy, have any sort of smoke and fires in that here on the morning. Looks like folks net up in Canada still got plenty of fires to contend with up in those parts there. However, looks like the lighter variety of smoke and that getting kicked up in the atmosphere here. Still got a couple, 6 or so coming across the western side of Canada. Got a dozen or so up around the Pacific Northwest. Just north of the Washington Canadian border there, looks like. Got about 6 or 7 through there. Another couple, 2, 3, 4 north of Seattle. And another 9, or what is that? 3, I guess, a couple, 2, 3 or so down around Portland. Another 10 off to the east over toward the Idaho way there. But it looks like the dead smoke and that kind of up around the east side of Washington over toward the Idaho northern parts there. Folks net in Oregon, southern part of Oregon, down in northern parts of Kelly, got about a half dozen fires net through there. North of, looks like Sacramento, got about a dozen, 12, 15 fires net through there. Looks like Fresno got about a couple, 2, 3, 7, another couple, 2, 3, 4 net down to the south. And across the southeast, we still got some fires net to contend with down in Florida, Georgia, coming across the Carolinas, Alabama, Mississippi, clear over to Louisiana, Arkansas, up through the southern parts of Missouri, through that corridor, as we've seen pretty much all season long. Looks like some of those may be starting to abate, as maybe those storms that did tamp some of those down, perhaps, and that over the weekend here, but still got some to contend with, it appears, and some of those kicking up a little bit of smoke in some of those areas, so you may see some haze and whatnot in the atmosphere and that down in those parts here today. And that being said, we'll slide on over to futures rise as trade credit fears fade ahead of earnings deluge. And with that, you too, appreciate you guys checking in here this morning. Shove on over to the other platforms here this morning. Get you all